Hi guys, and welcome to One More Page, a podcast for lovers of kids' books.
Packed full of interviews, book reviews and industry gossip, not to mention the occasional fart joke, One More Page is your fortnightly foray into the world of children's books.
Whether you're a kid, mum, dad, author, illustrator, teacher, librarian, or just one of those people who never grew up, this is the podcast for you. So, let's meet your hosts.
I'm Kate, and I get my best ideas whenever I don't have a pencil to write them down.
I'm Liz, and my best ideas arrive late at night when I should be sleeping.
And I'm Nat, and the ideas in my head are like 100 goldfish crammed into a little fishbowl, all bumping into each other and not enough fish food to feed them all. And this is...
One More Page!
In case you haven't guessed already, today's episode is all about ideas, those tricky things that can seem hard to find, but really can be found everywhere.
In today's episode, I'll be chatting to children's author Zanny Louise, who's never short of creative ideas. She's the author of several picture books and the new Tiggy and the Magic Paintbrush series for new readers, and she's got lots more books in the pipeline.
Can't wait to hear it. But first, it's shout-out time. Nat, what have you got for us today?
Okay, well, I have to give a shout out to all the brave parents who are about to endure the wrath of the school holidays, whilst also giving a total woohoo to all the kids who get to run around like uneducated maniacs for a couple of weeks. So, if you're looking for something to keep the Rugrats amused, or kids, if your parents are like way too boring to hang out with all holidays, here's a couple of events for book lovers that deserve a shout out. In Sydney, there's a live stage adaptation of David Walliams' novel Billionaire Boy that's running from the 14th to the 29th of April. And in Melbourne, check out the events at the 100-storey building in Footscray. This is an awesome place any time of the year, really, as they're all about building creativity and literacy for kids, but their 100-storey holiday program is literally out of this world. Running daily from today to the 10th of April, it includes workshops where you make your own comics, set off into intergalactic adventures in search of your own planet, take a ride in their glass elevator to inspire a script for a radio play, and role-play your own fantasy character in a group quest. So with all that and much more going on, I don't want to hear one single, "Mum, I'm bored." Links for all the excitement are in our show notes.
Wow, that is a great selection. Actually, my daughter and her aunt are going to see Billionaire Boy, so I will be able to tell you all about it in a couple of weeks.
Can't wait.
Yeah, but right now, it's time to listen to our fantastic interview with Zanny Louise.
Zanny Louise is a CBCA notable Australian children's book author. She also writes a wonderful blog full of insights into her writing life and tours schools and writing festivals. Zanny, thanks for joining us today at One More Page.
Oh, hi Liz. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Firstly, I was wondering if you can share with our listeners how your children's writing career started.
Well, it was quite organic. It sort of evolved as much of my projects do. So I was writing when I was first pregnant with my first daughter. I began writing educational resources and training materials for different things like aged care and disability support work and things. And I just sort of had quite an itch to be doing creative things. So I had lots of short stories in my head whilst I was pushing the pram and things like that. So started to write them down in the evenings or record them on my phone. And among those stories were some children's stories and lots of little rhymes that my husband and I kind of made up. I did send a little verse story away at some point and got my first proper rejection letter. Yeah, but I was still tinkering. I was just playing. And around that time I started a blog, a parenting blog, just to have a place to kind of write regularly. And that evolved. And over the time I was reviewing children's books. So I was receiving piles of books every month from different publishers. And that was really fantastic because I was just, had my fingertips at the edge of what was just out. So I was getting access to this amazing literature and just falling in love more and more with picture books. So that's sort of where the passion kind of really took hold, and just reading to children, as you know, a lot of authors, that is a stimulation for them to get into their own writing. So I was reading a lot to my children, making up a lot of little stories on the go. And at some point I kind of declared on my public Facebook page, which was linked to my blog, that I wanted to write for children. And that was, I knew exactly the direction I wanted to go in now. And it just happened that the managing director of Hardy Grant Egmont at the time, she was a reader of my blog because she had a child similar age to mine and we'd connected about something else. And she said, I'd love you to send me a manuscript. So that was my first children's book, Too Busy Sleeping, which I wrote soon after my second child was born. And so that was kind of my step into publishing. And but the whole journey, that whole time, was about 3 or 4 years maybe of just constant play and organic writing with it, basically.
Excellent. Oh, that's a great story, a great start as well. So your first 2 picture books, Too Busy Sleeping and Archie and the Bear, which I love. I was wondering if you can share what inspired you to write both of those stories.
So Too Busy Sleeping, it's about a little girl called Eleanor, and she has a baby brother, and it's his first day at home. And all she wants to do is play games with him and take him to the sand pit and play blocks with him and take him to the play park. But because he is a 1-day-old baby, of course, he can't do that, and he's always sleeping. And I just was kind of tapping into the experience of my child who had just had a little sister. Because for her, she was never really jealous. She wasn't, worried about having a baby brother or sister. The whole time for her it was pure excitement and anticipation. And then when the baby finally arrived, there were moments of frustration to do with sort of not quite getting it, that this is like a little newborn baby and why are they always sleeping? That's not, I was envisioning this kind of immediate play date. So this kind of disappointment, frustration, I suppose. And Archie and the Bear, well, I sort of always, and I still do, kind of field ideas constantly. Every day I'm probably writing down 3 or 4 picture book ideas or little things, wisps of ideas. It could be a picture book. And we were camping near Mount Warning, and there was a little kid playing handball. He was about 12 or maybe 11, and he was dressed in a wolf suit. And my husband joked, "Oh, is that a boy dressed as a wolf, or is that a wolf dressed as a boy?" And it just something about that little kind of irony, sat in my brain somewhere. And when I next sat down to do my educational writing work, and this is something I still do, I tend to distract myself by doing my creative work. I just kind of launched into this little story about this boy who dressed as a bear and believed he was a bear. So that story is kind of a lot about identity and about a little boy who believes he is a bear and is sort of looking for people to take him seriously as a bear. And then he sets off into the woods and finds a bear who thinks he's a boy. So, that's where that seed of the idea came from.
And you also have an early reader series called Tiggy and the Magic Paintbrush. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about that and how you came up with the idea.
Well, again, a lot of these things sort of evolve. This one particularly, it was my first kind of foray into writing for slightly older readers. So it's still only 4 to 7-year-olds. They're very much still picture books, highly illustrated, but they're more in the format of a chapter book. They're not chapter books technically, but they're kind of heading in that direction. So I guess they're a bit of a bridge, towards an early reader. So the idea initially came. I was folding the washing and my daughter was jumping on the bed and we were just sort of playing, and we were talking about, what would it be like if we had a 3D printing machine and what could we print? And she thought she might print a little friend, which was a little sheep. And so I wrote these stories about this little girl called Win whose dad brought home a 3D printing machine and couldn't use it because he was a bit not very technical, but she worked out that she could use it to print kind of anything she wanted. So she was printing these sort of magical things almost. So I submitted a few of those stories to a publisher at the time, and I was really lucky to get to work with an editor, and she gave me lots of feedback, back and forth. And one of her bits of feedback was, the name Win is a little bit old-fashioned. And, so I was sort of brainstorming more contemporary names, I suppose. And another bit of feedback was the 3D printing machine, that's an interesting concept, but what about something a bit more classical? What's something that could maybe stand the test of time a little bit more? So as my daughter was rushing past one day with a pretend paintbrush and painting, things in the air, I thought, that's a good device, because that's something that the character, whose name is now Tiggy, can carry around with her wherever she goes. So again, that was, that evolved over many, many months, and lots of rewriting and work with an editor and several editors actually.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love the idea of the paintbrush. So I understand you've also got a few more books coming out, such as a picture book called Errol. Can you tell us a bit about that book and what inspired it? And also if you've got any other book news you can share with us.
Yeah, so Errol's very exciting. It's a picture book with Scholastic. It's coming out in June this year, and it's illustrated by Philip Bunting, who's done Mopoke. If ever any of your listeners have seen that, that's a hilarious book. And I picked it up in a bookshop and just laughed out loud, which I don't think I've ever done before or since. It's very funny. So that was really exciting to get paired with him. So that story, so it's about a little penguin who his mum is trying to get him to come, take, I think they've been shopping or something, and he has to come with her to the car or wherever they're going. And he just doesn't. So he just stays on the snow, in this kind of resolute way. And the mum sort of gets frustrated and walks off without him. And then she comes back at some point and he's gone. And she has a big fit and ends up collapsing and losing all her shopping, etc. And Errol's gone, And so the story is sort of, don't worry, he comes back, But it's a very simple scenario, I guess. But it's kind of tapping into that whole dynamic between the parent and particularly the mum and the child, I think. And I've seen that a lot in amongst other parents and myself as well, where you have those moments of frustration where you say, right, I'm going, and you just go and you expect that the kid's going to follow you. But what if they don't?
Wonderful. And aside from Errol, do you have any other books coming out that you can share with us?
Yeah. So there's a follow-up Errol. So there'll be a second Errol book the following year, I think. And that's, quite funny. I'll tell you about that another time. There is another book I'm contracted for, which is called Dewey Decimal and the Hidden Adventure. I'm not sure if that might be a working title as such, but it's basically a little library mouse who protects the library, but the library sort of has hidden moments of chaos and he has to kind of negotiate that with the characters.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, so that's a really fun little picture book that I'm working on with the 5 Mile Press. So that hopefully will be up, I think, later this year, but maybe early next year.
I'd love to hear thoughts about coming up with new ideas in general. Do you think it's easier for some people than others to think of story ideas and character ideas, or does everybody have it in them?
Well, I mean, I don't really know. I kind of feel like it's something you can cultivate. It's something I definitely have cultivated. It's kind of where you put your energy, I suppose. So when I worked in visual arts, I used to work in a contemporary art gallery. That's all I thought about. That was my world. That was my obsession. I was really inquisitive and constantly sort of paying attention to the different artists I was working with and the different artwork, and sort of had a constant field of stories coming from that. And likewise, when I started writing, so with my parenting blog, it was the same. Like I was writing little stories about my experiences as a parent, and I had a constant sort of flood of ideas because that was where my attention was. And at some point, I redirected my energies towards writing for children, and so of course read a lot of books for children. And now I never get ideas for parenting blogs. It's totally off my radar, but I'm getting constant sort of floods of ideas about children's stories. And yeah, like I say, you sort of will write down 3 or 4 ideas a day, and that's probably only the tip of the iceberg. I think you could excavate even further if I was forced to come up with many more ideas, just because I think it's just where you sort of put your attention. And I'm very much sort of into the idea of playing in creativity and not having too many rigid rules, so anything could potentially be a picture book or a story idea.
Excellent. All right. And I'd also just love to find out what kind of books you read as a child and who your favourite authors might have been and how they've kind of influenced your writing life as an adult.
I mean, this is a question I always get asked at school visits, and I'm like, I don't, like I have lots of different people who inspired me. I read a lot of Roald Dahl and Enid Blyton and a lot of the things the kids are reading now. Secret Garden, I think, was one of my favourite stories. And I can't remember why exactly. I think it's a lot to do with the imagery. And I think it's called The Little Princess. And yeah, so those sort of old-fashioned stories, I read a lot of those sort of things. I loved Alison Lester's books as a child, and I've still got some of hers, and they're very much my daughter's favourites as well. And there's something about the realness of them, I think, and where my daughters and I are all quite social people, like we're quite interested in people. So those books really appealed to us because it's sort of a little insight into the way different people live. So I think that's what the attraction is with those books. A lot of Pamela Allen books, and Yeah, I love funny books. I still do. And so these days, I suppose my inspiration comes a lot from, people like Oliver Jeffers or John Classen or Mo Willems. Those are where my, real passions lie. And for the older fiction, Kate DiCamillo, I really love her writing, and John Green. Yeah, I'm sort of more and more kind of drawn to funnier things, I think. Things with a bit of lightness of touch. That's where my love really lies.
And lastly, where's the best place for our listeners to find you online to hear more about your books?
Well, I spend a lot of time on my website, which is zannylouise.com. And so I have a blog there. So I share lots of little insights into what I'm working on or how I'm working, writing things, but also, what's happening with the books themselves. And there's, all my events and my workshop things are all on my website. So that's a good place to go. And I have a newsletter. So you can subscribe to the newsletter, and I sort of, put in the relevant bits of news, basically.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well, but you can see the links on the website.
Great, thanks. And we'll put links to all of those in our podcast show notes on our website. So thank you so much, Zanny, for speaking with us today.
Oh, thanks, Liz. It was lovely. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
That was such a good interview, Liz. I loved hearing Zanny talk about the idea of working to cultivate ideas. I must work really hard in the shower because for some reason my ideas always seem to come to me in the shower.
That's because it's like the least convenient time to write it down. That is exactly why.
You know what? My partner bought me a waterproof pad that sticks to the shower wall and a waterproof pencil so I can write them down.
That is awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool present. So who are you talking to in our next episode, Liz?
Next time, I'll be chatting with legendary Australian kids author Deborah Abella. Deb has written 25 books for children, including the Max Remy Super Spy series, Teresa, A New Australian, and her first picture book, Wolfie, An Unlikely Hero. Her latest book, The Most Marvellous Spelling Bee Mystery, is coming out at the end of the month.
25 books is an amazing achievement, and they're really varied as well. It seems like there's nothing that she can't do. I'm really looking forward to that interview next episode, Liz.
Yes, and while Deb's been writing a lot of books, we've been reading a lot of books, and now it's time for What You're Reading. Kate, what's been on the book menu for you?
I've just finished reading the fourth book in the Tommy Bell Bushranger Boy series by Jane Smith, which was published by Big Sky Publishing. It's the fourth book in the series, but it's actually the first of these that I've read, but I found it worked really well as a standalone. I didn't know it was a series when I picked it up, and it really didn't matter. The series is about a boy who finds an old hat and discovers that it has the power to transport him back to the time of the bushrangers. In the book I read, Outback Adventure, Tommy's transported back to 1870, and this time his friend Martin comes along for the ride. They're offered work droving cattle from central Queensland to Adelaide. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm sure you can guess from the name of the series that a bushranger gets involved and the boys get more than they bargained for.
Okay, cool. So it's like a sort of fantasy sci-fi set in Australia?
Well, no, it's like a time slip with like a lot of historical truth in it. So, this was the best thing about it, was that you're actually learning a lot, but it's, done without being boring about it. So the bushrangers in the series are real bushrangers, and the events really did happen.
Really did happen. Yeah, right. So I must have missed that history class at school with the time traveling kids.
Okay, well, aside from the time traveling kids, the other stuff really did happen. And there's like a historical note at the back explaining like the true elements of the story. And there's also like a really fun Q&A with the character of the bushranger. So it's really educational, but it's also fun and easy to read. The books are only about 100 pages each. They're fast paced. There's illustrations every 5 to 10 pages. So I'd really recommend them for confident, independent readers from around 6 or 7.
Who like historically factual sci-fi fantasies time traveling.
Those kids.
Those
Exactly.
kids, got it.
All right, Liz, what about you? What have you been reading?
I've read The Girl, the Dog and the Writer in Rome by Katrina Nanestead, and it's got beautiful cover art by illustrator Cheryl Orsini, and this one's published by HarperCollins imprint ABC Books. It's a charming story about a 10-year-old girl called Freya Peachtree, who we meet when she's been living back in London for around 6 months after exploring the world with her zoologist mother. They've been travelling around the Arctic studying animals and nature, and then when her mum is sick and has to go away for a while, Freya is sent to stay in Rome with her mother's friend, who's an absent-minded crime writer called Tobias.
Ooh, do I sense a mystery coming on?
There is mystery. There's mystery and so much more. It's got a lot going on, but it's all woven together in a really kind of clever way. So Freya herself is an interesting little character. She's more used to animals than people. So at the start of the story, she's kind of hiding under tables to avoid people that make her feel uncomfortable. But then when she sets off on her big adventure living in Rome with Tobias, he kind of brings her out of her shell because he's also really quirky, and he kind of helps her embrace her differences. So he doesn't think she's strange at all. And because of that, she sort of starts being herself and then, gets involved in a huge mystery. Kind of, it's almost like one of Tobias's crime novels is brought to life with a big adventure that sees them running all around Rome to all the sort of well-known landmarks, and they're running around the Spanish Steps, and it's awesome. So,
wow, it's kind of like almost like a Da Vinci Code, but for kids.
Yeah, kind of. But there's also so much more. Like there's friends, there's family, there's a whole lot of food. So because it's set in Italy, there's so much gelato all the time. There's scenes in a restaurant, there's delicious food. There's heaps of Italian words used all the time as well. So it's a kind of really cool book for kids to get a real taste of a different culture. And there's a dog as well. There's just so much happening, but it really works. There's a dog called Finnegan who comes along on all of the adventures.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So age range of the readers?
I think it's a good book for confident readers who are aged maybe 8 or 9 through to 11 or 12. And it was also just listed as a CBCA notable book in the younger readers category.
Sounds great.
And I love gelato, so that's already good. Any book with gelato is a book of my heart.
You'll love it. It's all about raspberry gelato.
Oh, that's the best kind.
So Nat, what have you been reading lately?
So I got my picture book on this week and read What You're Building written by Andrew Dado, illustrated by Stephen Michael King, and published by HarperCollins. So this is the kind of book that you love for the moment you pick it up. The cover sort of feels like a corrugated cardboard, which sets the feel for the whole book. It's a cute and really Aussie story of a milk bar being pulled down and replaced by a shiny new supermarket, and a boy, Davey, who asks Bruce the Builder for bits of wood for his own project. Bruce imagines all the things that Davey could possibly be using the wood to build, which allows for a huge variety of beautiful illustrations.
Yeah, I love the illustrations in this. I'm a big fan of Stephen Michael King's work, and I feel like this one's a little bit different from some of the other picture books of his that I've seen. There's a lot of collage used, and there's even lots of photographs of some objects that are kind of woven in as well. So there's a lot to see.
Yeah, the illustrations are so much fun, and it's going to be a huge winner for kids who love like tools and diggers and machines. You know, those kids that like stop on the side of the road every time there's a crane and just stare at it for hours. They're going to love this book. And there's heaps of detail on every page. So it's sort of the kind of book that you can find something new every time you read it. It's also unashamedly Aussie, which can sometimes make me cringe, but in this book, it's quite endearing, using references like milk bar and cubby and billy cart, and Bruce the Builder even dons the traditional blue Bond singlet. So get your Aussie on, pick up a copy of What You're Building, and g'day mate, you'll enjoy it. Cobber. Sorry, that was my best like Aussie impression with a kind of nasally touch because I have a cold at the moment. Cobber, g'day. There you go. Jolly good show. No, that's not Australian.
I wasn't even sure that cobber was Australian. Is that Australian?
I don't think anyone says copper anymore, do they?
Hey, I say cobber.
Oh, you do?
Cobber.
Okay then.
Strike a light.
Struth, Nat.
Struth. Okay, that's enough.
Okay, so now it's time to announce our latest competition. Thanks to 5 Mile Press, you can win the first 2 books in the Tiggy and the Magic Paintbrush early reader series by Zanny Louise, A School Day Smile and a Pet Called Nibbles.
They're aimed at kids around 4 to 7 and are perfect for newly independent readers, with lots of coloured pictures by illustrator Gillian Flint.
To be in the running, visit the competitions page on our website at onemorepagepodcast.com/win. Tell us in 25 words or less what you would paint if you had a magic paintbrush that could paint anything you wished for, just like Tiggy.
Okay, kids, it's that part of the show that's just for you. Backflip off the couch, spin around on the clothesline, and yell out to all the neighbours that it's time for...
So, what's happening this time, Tarzan?
Tarzan Nat, please. Natzan. I'm going with Natzan. Well, I pretty much just got really lazy this week and decided that someone else could do my job for me. I also discovered that kids work for peanuts, like literally peanuts. Chocolate-covered ones, but still. Unless, of course, there's the allergy problem. But anyway, this kid's not allergic to peanuts. So I handballed my job to an awesome kid who turns out is better at it than me anyway. So I'd like to introduce Zoo Myka. She's 12 and a huge bookworm. And today she'll be taking the One More Page reins as our guest interviewer and having a chat to prolific author Tristan Banks. I'm going to sit back, get a foot massage and sip on a pina colada as Zoo Myka takes care of this week's kids' capers. Take it away, Zoo Myka. Hey Liz, pass my drink. And Kate, can you get started on the feet, please?
Kids Capers!
Tristan is an author for children and teens with books including the My Life series, Max Slater, and Two Wolves, a crime mystery novel for middle graders. Tristan's new books are My Life and Other Weaponized Muffins, the 5th book in the My Life series, and The Fall, a CBCA notable thriller novel for ages 10 plus. Zoo Myka is a 12-year-old girl from New South Wales. She loves reading and is currently beginning to write her own book. Her favourite books are about dystopian lands or are historical fictions. She loves mystery and thriller novels and is an epic speed reader. All right, Zoo Myka, time for me to chill out. The microphone is yours.
Thanks, Nat. Hi, Tristan.
Hi, how are you?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to be on the best podcast in the world. Nat made me say
I know.
she's paying me, but it's still the best podcast in the whole world ever.
Definitely. So I have a few questions for you today.
Awesome.
So my first question is, what inspired you to first start writing? Have you always wanted to be an author?
Have I always wanted to be an author? Not consciously. I have always loved reading and I've always loved writing. I've always loved storytelling in lots of different forms. And I think when I was a kid, I really wanted to be, I wanted to be a filmmaker and I wanted to be an actor. And I told stories in that way. I wanted to write things for the stage and I always performed in school plays. So that was my outlet. But then looking back, I also know that there are book covers that I made from when I was, in high school saying, from the best-selling author. And there was a book called Space Stack that I wrote, lots of horror stories when I was in high school.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't think I really knew how to become an author. I didn't really know that was a possibility. It always seemed more possible for me to make films and to act.
What age did you decide I want to be an author?
Probably after my first book was published, really. I had been writing articles for magazines and newspapers for years. I think my first published article in a magazine was maybe when I was about 19 or 20.
Oh, wow.
I did that for about 10 years alongside acting and filmmaking before I finally had an opportunity to write a book. And I did that, and I wrote these 4 very short books for Scholastic for educational publication. And I thought, this is really fun. And how do I do more of it? And then I sort of started developing book ideas and pitching them to publishers. So I really think that I found out I was an author by doing it as opposed to dreaming of it and then, turning that into a reality.
Okay, my second question for you is do you try and get any messages across with your books, or are they just purely for the purpose of storytelling?
At first, they're for the purpose of storytelling. And then I read back drafts and I find out what the story is about over the course of writing many drafts. And then I try to strengthen those threads, certain premises. Like, for instance, with my book, The Fall, which is my most recent book, I found out that it was about sort of rite of passage things for boys and for kids moving from being children into being teenagers. So then I learnt lots about rites of passage, and I learnt there was a great guy called Arno Rubinstein, and he does lots of stuff about rites of passage in sort of primal cultures, in indigenous cultures, and I read lots about that, and I sort of realised that this was a rite of passage story for a kid moving from childhood into adulthood.
That's really cool. So on the topic of The Fall, your new book, Sam in The Fall is the main protagonist. The book is a real page turner. I could literally not put it down until I read the end. Sam is really relatable and an awesome character. Was he inspired by anyone?
Was Sam inspired by anyone? I think in some ways all of the characters are me. I try to write the characters from my point of view. I sometimes call the character Tristan in a first draft in order to relate to them. Sam is a character who experiences something that is similar to what I experienced when I was in high school on work experience with Channel 10 News. I went along to a crime scene in King's Cross in Sydney. There was someone who had grabbed a woman's handbag, run off through a park, jumped over a fence at the back of the park, and didn't realise that the fence at the back of the park was on top of a multi-storey car park and fell several stories. And I'm not sure if the person died or not, but I sort of used that experience of visiting this crime scene and sort of started to wonder what it would be like if you had a parent who was a crime reporter and you got to go along to crime scenes all the time. And I used that crime as the sort of inspiration for the crime in the fall.
Oh, wow.
So in a way, yeah, it's very much me. And I gave Sam Garner the operation that I had when I was kind of 12 going on 13, which is the age that he is. And yeah, and so there are many, many things in the book, many things in the character that are inspired by my own life when I was 12 or 13.
That's really cool. So a few more questions.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of different books and they stretch across a lot of different genres. Do you find it difficult to write across genres?
I think I have to write across genres, and when I started writing The Fall, actually, I asked Isabel Carmody, who's a really well-known Australian fantasy writer, and she's a very generous human, and she's, helps out a lot of writers, a lot of other writers. And I asked her whether, I felt like this was a crime genre story, and I said, but I don't know anything about the crime genre. Should I learn about crime? Do I have to read everything there is to know about crime genre? And she assured me that I didn't. And she said, write the story that you have to tell and then work out later what it's about and what genre it is. And she really said that that's really up to the publisher and the marketing team to try and market it as a certain genre. So I just wrote the story that was inside me. And it turned out that because there was a crime at the centre of it, it fits into that genre.
That's really, really awesome.
Yeah, I try not to just sort of tick the boxes of a genre and say, okay, because crime stories have to do this, I'll just do this as well. I want the stories to feel original and true and honest.
Yeah. So my last question is that before you told me that you used to be an actor, do you think that impacts the way you write the books or the way you market your books?
I think so. I think it helps. Being an actor, I think it helps in terms of writing dialogue. You're used to improvising, thinking on your feet, embodying a character, trying to get inside the character and understand their motivations for doing things. So I certainly think it helps from a storytelling point of view. And then from a marketing point of view, or from getting the stories out in the world or bringing them to life for different people, I certainly think it helps. Speaking is a big thing that I do. I visit lots of schools and lots of festivals and things, and it's really fun for me to try to bring the stories to life on stage and also in videos on my YouTube channel. So I certainly think, actually, if you look, a lot of authors were actors or presenters at some point. You look at Anne Doe or Aaron Blabey. Lots of Australian children's and teen authors come from a background in acting or TV and film.
Yeah. If you could make one of your books into a movie, what one would it be?
I'm actually on the fourth draft, or just finished the fourth draft of a feature film script for Two Wolves.
Really?
Yeah, and I always saw that as a film unfolding in my mind. So definitely that, and I'm also developing a TV series that's a sort of spin-off from Two Wolves, the book. And then I think once I've finished working on that, I really want to get cracking on The Fall as well, because I can really see that as both TV and film. So that's a definite plan of mine, is to do that.
Yeah, I would definitely buy tickets to watch those movies.
Oh, cool. Good.
Okay, I know I said that was my final question, but I've just thought of another question. I was
go
I've got to
for it.
ask this. I'm trying to write my own book at the moment and become an author, and I was wondering if you have any advice for me.
I definitely have advice. It's tricky to write a book, so don't get put off. So I would say be kind to yourself. When you read your stuff back and you don't love it, just know that that's what I spend my entire life doing, looking and going, oh no, what have I done? This is disastrous. I must be the worst author in the world. And just know that actually that's not the case and that it's tricky for everyone.
Okay, yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Just know that, I rewrite my books. Maybe I do 6 or 7 drafts maybe before I give it to my publisher. Wow. And within that 6 or 7 drafts, I will have actually been through it a number of times to get it to each of those draft levels. So just know that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And when you read it back and it doesn't make sense, or you're bored, or you're tired with reading it and you're sick of it and you don't, you wish you'd never started, that's actually just the normal state of writing a book. That's my whole life. And know that if you just hang out with it, if you just keep on trying it from lots of different angles and trying to understand the story, eventually you'll read a version of it and you'll go, oh, it's actually really good. I really like it again.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's okay. And good luck.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely keep that in mind.
No problem.
Just before we go, I'd just like to ask if there's any insider information you can give us about any upcoming projects.
Well, an exciting thing is that the Tom Weekly series is being re-released. It was called the My Life series, and they're re-releasing it as Tom Weekly. And 3 books are coming out on the 1st of April, and they've got new design, and then the interior design is sort of more spacious and has bigger illustrations. And then 2 more books in the series are being released in June, and then the 6th book in the series, which is a new book, is coming out on the 1st of July. So over the next sort of 4, 5, 6 months, I'm going to be traveling around and talking about Tom Weekly. And interestingly, when you talk about whether characters are inspired by me, Tom Weekly basically is me. He's a kooky kind of character. I talk about lots of weird stuff that happened to me when I was a kid in those books, like my sister trying to make me eat Vegemite off her big toe, and the time I had my appendix removed in order to avoid detention with my school librarian, and I don't know, lots of fun stuff. And then in the new book, Tom is attacked by a gang of sort of killer possums, and I don't know, lots of fun stuff from my life. And then I give them sort of a comical twist. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to be traveling around talking about Tom Weekly for the next few months.
That's really cool. Will you be going to different schools?
I will. I'm actually going to probably 100 and something schools this year.
Oh, wow.
In Victoria and South Australia and New South Wales and Canberra, ACT, and Queensland as well. Whereabouts which state are you in?
New South Wales.
All right, cool. Oh, well, you never know. I am visiting lots of...
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me interview you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. See you, Zoo Myka.
Bye.
Bye.
Kids Capers!
Wow, fantastic interview between Zoo Myka and Tristan, Nat. That was really fantastic. Only next time, would you mind washing your feet before we do the whole massage thing?
Hey, it's my day off. If I want stinky feet with green stuff between the toenails, I'll have it.
Okay.
Yummy. Yum. Hey, Liz, don't get jealous. You can do my feet next time, bunions and all, baby. Woo!
Okay, now it's time to find out what's on our radar, where we talk about something we've discovered lately or something we're looking forward to. Liz?
Well, it's definitely not Nat's feet.
As if I'm not on your radar, my feet are on your radar.
That's right. So on my radar right now is a book-related museum exhibition. So the picture book Alphabetical Sydney by Hilary Bell and Antonia Pacenti has been brought to life in a hands-on exhibition at the Museum of Sydney. I really love this picture book, which depicts some of Sydney's best-loved places and experiences, from Yum Cha to renovating to ocean pools and the Mr. Whippy van. So an interactive tribute to this beautiful book sounds like a great way to spend an afternoon. I'll definitely be checking it out, and it's on until the 12th of August if you're interested as well.
Oh, that sounds so cool. Now, wait, is this one of those things where I have to borrow someone's kid to go to, or can I get away with turning up on my own?
I'm pretty sure you're going to need to take a kid, yeah.
So listeners, you should know that a lot of my friends get free babysitting because I always need to borrow kids to get into these events, or otherwise I just tag along with one of these guys and pretend I'm like the crazy aunt.
Forget about an aunt. I'm pretty sure my kids want you as their new mum. It's all like Nat this and Nat that in my house. Seriously. Anyway, don't forget that next fortnight we'll be chatting to legendary author Deborah Bella, and in the meantime, we'd love it if you could leave us a rating or review on iTunes and share the podcast with your friends.
Whoa. Does that mean it's over already?
No, we want one more page.
Sadly, yes. But join us in a fortnight for another episode of...
Sorry, I just need a moment.
One more page!
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Page. Read the show notes and find all our episodes at www.onemorepagepodcast.com. Don't forget, you can also subscribe via the iTunes Store or your favourite podcast app.
We love to receive listener questions and hear any kids' book news or reading recommendations. Chat with us on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter and Instagram at OneMorePageAU. You can also email us at onemorepagepodcast@gmail.com.
A big thank you to Marianne Koo, who does all of our illustrations. That's it from us this time, but we hope you can join us next time for one more episode of One More Page.
Sorry guys, no bloopers this time. We were just too perfect.
What about that bit where you cracked up and headbutted your microphone and then fell off your chair?
Yes, that bit was...
I said no bloopers.
That was funny.